Hey guys, welcome to Rihanna's Lens, where I interact with you about the components in the STEM field and introduce you to fascinating people who passionately inhabit the scientific and technical frontiers of our society. My name is Rihanna Malhotra, and I'm absolutely elated to share this podcast with all of you. On this episode, I'm joined by a guest who's a bat conservationist. She's an active member of the Girl Scout, and she's also a National Geographic Explorer. I'm so glad to welcome and introduce Kristen Lear. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to begin our discussion.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so thrilled to talk to you, especially because of the fact that I've never met or even rather talked to a bat conservationist. So this is all too new to me. And so let's just get started with it. So,
Awesome.
Firstly, I wanted to know what exactly is it that motivated you to get into this field?
It's a great question. I've always been really drawn to animals. Growing up, I had lots of pets. I volunteered at the Humane Society, at the animal shelter, and I've always just really been drawn to animals and nature and being outside. And I've always especially had a very special place in my heart for misunderstood animals, things like rats, snakes, spiders, and bats. Bats, I think, are one of the most misunderstood groups of animals in the world. And so, I was just drawn to them. And in Girl Scouts, we would take night hikes sometimes during summer camps, and you could see the bats, flying around over you. And I was always curious about what they were doing. And, they're eating insects, helping control insect populations. And so I always just thought they were really neat. And so that's kind of how I got interested in the first place in bat conservation. And then I got my unofficial start in bat conservation when I was 12 in 6th grade, when I built bat houses for my Girl Scout Silver Award. So that was my kind of entry into the field, and it's been a lifelong passion ever since.
Oh, wow, that's definitely awesome. And yeah, it sure is an interesting field that you're exploring bats. And do you also look into snakes and rats as well?
I don't. I'm purely focused on bats, it's kind of crazy that you can actually have a whole career in just focusing on bats. But funny enough, I actually did have pet rats growing up. So they're great animals and really fun pets. So.
Oh, okay. So since you had an interest in this since you were really young, so what did your education journey look like? Was it a traditional path?
Yeah, it kind of was a traditional path. I always really enjoyed school. I loved being in school. I loved doing projects. So I knew that I wanted to go to college as I was, graduating from high school. And I knew that I wanted to work with animals for my career. But at that point, I didn't exactly know that you could have a career in bat conservation. And so I thought that I wanted to be a vet. When I went to college, I wanted to focus on wildlife vet medicine. And so I started a program at Ohio Wesleyan University in the zoology department. And that was, the study of animals, and got really involved in some research there. And my second summer, so the summer after my sophomore year, I got to go down to Texas and help a PhD student with her bat research. So that was my first exposure to, the world of bat science and bat careers. And that's when I fell in love with that as a career, and knew from then on that I wanted to focus on bats. So I ditched the vet idea, and I started learning as much as I could about bats and bat conservation. I got my degree in zoology, my Bachelor of Arts, and then had a couple years off before I went to grad school, but got my PhD last year in integrative conservation. So I was studying pollinating bats in Northeast Mexico for my PhD research.
Oh, that's great. So now that you're finally a bat conservationist, what's your role and what do you focus on?
Yeah, great question. So as a bat conservationist, there's lots of different ways that you can be involved in bat conservation. We have people who are doing research, actual scientific research with bats on many different aspects of bat biology, bat behavior, bat conservation. But the focus that my job and my passion lies in is working with people to do on the ground conservation work. So I'm not really studying the bats anymore. I'm actually working with people to help protect them. And that's all needed in bat conservation to really move conservation forward. But I work at Bat Conservation International now. I work as an endangered species interventions specialist. And it's a long title, but I lead Bat Conservation International's agave restoration initiative. So we're working to restore agave plants for nectar feeding bats across the US Southwest and Mexico. So I get to lead that initiative, work with a huge diversity of people and organizations to restore these really important food plants for these nectar bats. So I get to do a lot of coordination, a lot of communicating with people, but I also get to do a lot of outreach, education. It's one of my passions, so it's one of the perks of the job.
Yeah, that's true. That's so fascinating. It sounds absolutely amazing. And
Yep.
so now there's this conception that it started, the huge pandemic that we're still going through, it started with bats. So what are your views about that?
So that's a good question. We don't yet know where it came from, where COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 virus came from. There's a lot of research going into the origins of the virus and where it did start, but we don't really know yet. We may never know 100% for sure. But I think the key is, even if it is, from the wild, from wildlife that jumped over into humans, zoonotic disease, the really key thing is it's not the animal's fault, whether it's a bat or a pangolin or whatever it could be. It's not the animal's fault. They're living out there in their environments. They're very important. Bats are extremely important for, like I said, insect pest control and pollination. So many benefits we derive from bats. And they're out there doing their thing. And the problem happens when we, people, start coming into closer and closer and closer contact with these wild animals. We can have birds and we can have bats in our yards, flying around above us, and that's not a problem. The problem comes when we start really, handling animals that we shouldn't be, or not taking proper precautions, proper health and safety precautions when we do. And so I just really want to hammer home, it's not the wildlife's fault, and we really need to think about how we interact with wildlife and nature as we move forward so that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, definitely. That was beautifully said. And as you said, that every animal, including bats, are so important for our ecosystem. They each have everything or anything to provide to the environment. So it's not that we should blame the bats alone for this entire pandemic, and it's just transmitted, like from us humans, it's being transmitted. So yeah, that's beautifully said. And what are some more interesting facts about bats?
Oh, I love this question because there's so many cool bat facts. So some of the insect-eating bats can eat a lot of insects in a night, and they can eat up to half their body weight, sometimes more, in insects every night during the summer. That's a lot of insects. And if you think about what they're eating, these insect-eating bats are consuming things like moths and beetles, including pests, so including insects that destroy our agricultural crops. So these bats, it's estimated that they save just the US agricultural industry about an average of $23 billion a year on insect pest control services. So farmers don't have to spray as many pesticides, they save money because these bats are eating the pests. So that's a really awesome fact. The majority of bats in the world eat insects, but there are other bats, like the ones that I work with, that eat nectar and pollen from flowers. So they're really important pollinators. If you like chocolate or mangoes or bananas or tequila. All those plants are pollinated by bats. So again, very important. I think two of my favorite bat facts, I think, also are fun facts. And one is that bat moms are basically super moms. They can, when they give birth to their one pup per year, the baby can be up to a third of the mom's body weight when it's born. So that would be like a human giving birth to a toddler, which is pretty crazy. And then the other cool fact about one of the bat species that we have here in the US, the Mexican free-tailed bat, they are the fastest animal flyer in the entire world in straight horizontal flight. They can fly up to 100 miles per hour in straight flight. And they're about this big. So they're really small bats that can fly really fast. So those are some just basic fun bat facts, and there's so many more cool ones.
Yeah, these were so interesting. I never even knew about them before, but it sounds so cool. And I would definitely like to look into it more and get to know more about bats, because I never knew these many things about them. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think also too, like people, when you hear the word bat, you kind of think of little brown, flying animal. But there's a huge diversity of bats in the world. There's over 1,400 different species or types of bats in the world, and they all behave different. They look different. They're different colors. They live in different environments. So it's not like, one thing. They're all very different. And I think one of the common misconceptions about bats is that they're rodents, rats with wings or flying mice. They're not. They are mammals. They have fur just like we do, have hair, but they actually are more closely related evolutionarily to people than to rodents, which is kind of bizarre. But they're not just little rodents flying around in the sky.
Oh, wow, that's great. And that's also new to me. So I would definitely want to look into it more. And I'll get back to you once I get to know more about my facts. And I'll definitely love to discuss them with you in a future time.
Absolutely. I could talk about bats all day. They're so cool.
Yeah, I certainly love your passion for bats. It's really awesome to see. So
thank you.
Moving on. So what exactly is it that you're focusing on right now? Are there any big projects?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I lead Bat Conservation International's agave restoration initiative. So it's with the pandemic, it's been a little hard with field work, going out and traveling. But I have been down to West Texas a couple times in the past few months, because we're starting our agave restoration work in West Texas now, which is super exciting that we're expanding there. And so we're doing that, and I'm helping lead a really, really cool project or research project using eDNA or environmental DNA to detect these nectar bats and find out where they're migrating. So basically what we're doing is we're going out, we're swabbing or collecting agave flowers when they're in bloom. And if a bat has been to the flower and eaten the nectar, you can pick up its DNA that is left behind by, in the saliva or the snot or whatever as it's feeding. And so we're using that really cool technology to try to find out where these bats are migrating through so that we can protect that migratory corridor. So that's a really kind of cool new approach. eDNA has really blossomed as a research approach for wildlife in the past few years. So we're really excited to be working on that kind of cutting edge research. So that, and hopefully next year, hopefully I can get down to Mexico, meet with our partners more, and do some more agave plantings, and actually, do some of the work in person. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So while pursuing this career, what's the most rewarding aspect, and what's the most enjoyable thing about your field?
Oh, I love thinking about that, because it's really, conservation can be challenging because it's a lot of work to protect these species. The main bat species that I'm working with is an endangered species, so it's declining, and we're trying to help recover it. So it can be kind of sad at times, but I think one of the most rewarding parts of the job is just how enthusiastic and how excited other people get when you talk with them about bats. I love doing outreach and education around bats, and I think it just really sparks something within people, because everyone has a bat story or knows somebody who has a bat encounter. Oh, I saw a bat in my yard, or everyone has that kind of experience, or almost everyone. And so it's just a really great way to connect to people, and talk about conservation. So I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of the job. And just knowing that you're making a difference, even if it's a slow go, you are making a difference.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I can relate to what you said right now when you were telling me the facts. I was so intrigued by it. And also, I want to also ask that bats, their frequency, I think I read it somewhere that it's higher than what humans can hear. So, what are your views about that?
Yeah, so most bat species that echolocate or use sonar do have the frequency too high for us to hear. There are some species that have a low enough frequency that we can actually hear it. So sometimes you could hear a bat flying around. But yeah, so that means we have to use specialized equipment to be able to monitor bats and detect them. So we use acoustic detectors, different kinds, to be able to pick up their echolocation call and tell that there is a bat flying around, even if we can't hear or see it in the dark sky.
Yeah, definitely. So it seems that technology has quickened our steps by a lot. And is there any other equipment that you use while?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the one thing with bats. Like the field of bat biology and bat conservation really took off, in the 80s, around there, because before that, we didn't really have the technology to be able to really study bats very well. Most bats are nocturnal. They're out at night. They live in dark places like caves or tree hollows or dark buildings. So it's really hard to study them without technology. So we have those acoustic detectors. We have specialized cameras that are infrared cameras that are, like those night vision binoculars or things you see in TV, the green light. We have those to watch bats. We have thermal cameras that pick up the body heat of the bats, and you can actually see them with their body heat. So we have all of that. We have the new eDNA approaches to find bats. We catch bats using these giant mist nets. They're basically like these really big nets that kind of look like hair nets that you put on your hair. And the bats are flying so fast they can't see them in time, and they get caught in them, and then we take them out and measure them and weigh them and then let them go. And all bats are able to see, so there are no blind bats, like that saying. They're all perfectly able to see. But yeah, so all that technology in the past, 30, well, God, now I guess it's like 50 years, 40 years, has really opened up the field of bat biology and conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all this new technology that's there, I'm sure before, when people who must be interested in bat conservation, they must be so proud looking at the development that has happened now, and all the young people that are getting into this field and exploring through technology.
Yes, exactly. It's a really, I love all the people that I work with are fantastic. And, the field of bat biology is a pretty relatively small field. And so, you kind of know, or at least know of everyone. And it's a great community to be part of.
I also wanted to ask you that bats are usually related with evil, like even during Halloween. There are images of bats all around the house or everywhere. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that whole spooky, evil, scary bat image kind of derives from a couple of sources. One, the Dracula, whole story definitely plays into people's minds about bats being associated with evil things, like vampires. And also just the fact that they're out at night, like I said, most bats are nocturnal, so they're out during the night. You can't see them. They're not like birds that are just sitting outside your window eating food. And so because they're out at night and associated with darkness, I think people associate darkness with bad, right? With evil. It's just for forever. I think it's been like that. And so unfortunately, they get that association. And then in things like TV and movies, the media perpetuates that kind of association. If you have a horror movie and, the characters are walking through a dark house at night, all of a sudden what jumps out or flies out at them, it's a swarm of bats. It's just like a tool to scare people when it really shouldn't be, because bats are really neat and they're not trying to hurt people. They're literally in those images, those scenes, it's the people are scaring the bats. They're having a good time sleeping in their little roost or socializing, and the person scares them and they fly away, right? But it's the other way around that it's portrayed, that the bats are attacking the people. So yeah, it's all this together that just perpetuates that association.
Right, definitely. After all, we're entering their habitat, so they're just flying away, and the media just portrays it as something scary.
Exactly.
So you also work with Nat Geographic. So how are your experiences in that, and what is your most favorite moment?
Yeah, like I said, I finished my PhD last year. And as part of my PhD work, I had to basically find grants and funding to support my research in Mexico. And so I applied for one of the grants through National Geographic during my grad school years and got that grant. So National Geographic supported my research, and I became a National Geographic Explorer, and I'm now part of the Nat Geo family, which is really, it's been an awesome experience. And I think my favorite moment from that was attending the 2019 Explorers Festival in Washington, D.C., where it was hundreds of explorers from around the world. All were brought to D.C. We had talks. I got to give a lightning talk, so a 60-second talk about my bat research on the National Geographic stage with like hundreds of people watching. And I was terrified, but it went very well. And just, getting to meet all the other explorers and learn about their work. It was just one of those really inspiring experiences that you will never forget. And I've maintained a lot of those contacts and collaborations over the past couple of years. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'm sure meeting so many explorers in the same field as you, that must be awesome. So did you meet anyone there that you looked up to?
Oh, definitely. So National Geographic obviously has a very big social media presence. They're, all over TV, magazine, they have a huge presence. And so, growing up, you read articles in the magazine or on social media, you see these people who are working in science and conservation and education and storytelling. You see those people. And I got to actually meet some of those people who I admire so much. And some of these people are very well established in their field, and they're further along in their careers. But some of them are like pretty early career people. And so that was really inspiring to see that you don't have to be at the end of your career to be to make an impact and to be an inspiration to others. And so that was really inspiring for me and helps keep me going.
Yeah, that's great. So now to all the people that want to join the same field as yours, what advice would you like to give to them?
Definitely. So like I said, bat conservation entails a lot of different things. You can be a researcher if you want to actually do research and have a lab and work at a university. You can focus more on education and outreach. You can do conservation work. There's so many different avenues that you can take to get into bat conservation. So I would suggest finding what you're really excited about and what you're really good at, what you enjoy doing, and then with bat conservation, obviously it's very specific with bats, but conservation in general is a big field. So just think about what issue or what animal or group of animals you would like to contribute and help. contribute towards and help. And then from there, you can start reaching out to people who are already involved in the field. Having mentors, I think, is one of the best ways to get into the field. Start talking to people and looking if there's volunteer opportunities or internship or paid opportunities working in the field, and start making those connections. It's never too early to start.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. Had a great time talking to you and getting to know your insights and all your experiences. I definitely got to know more about the facts of bats, and another fact, it also rhymes.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
And to let all of you know, this podcast is now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, RadioPublic, and Google Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to all listening platforms and stay tuned for more. Kristen, is there anything you'd like to say before we log off?
Just thank you very much for this opportunity. Like I said, bats are misunderstood, but very cool. So thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Well, bye-bye.